Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Do Not Falter Battle Lounge with the 2MK team. Or rather, it would be a battle lounge if it would allow me to join it. As it does not at the moment, you can still try and see if you yourself can get into Suntier's lounge if you want to get some matches. Oh, and it's finally decided that I guess because I started stream, I'm now able to join. I've been transformed back into a berserker. Does that mean my buttons are wrong too? No, those look fine. You may find that you also have some trouble joining into this one. It's not clear as yet why that is, but we go onward into today's matches. We are late back from something else, which means that this lounge will probably go on for considerably longer, and the stream will probably only close up at, well, in an hour from now. This is once again technically our EU stream. You will be able to tell whether or not you've got a good connection to most of us by just the ping as the lounge has been created by our EU member. Today we're not discussing anything in particular for the game. They are looking at balance changes, and all we can really do is fight to give even more data. The second reason basically being that the actual requirements of this game, because of its relatively slower speed in terms of normals and such, are quite a bit higher actually. If you understand enough about fighting games, you'll probably be fine, but players who are less familiar, let's just say the difference between silver and diamond is a lot higher, simply because the things that are being done are not just playing the game better or understanding your ranges. It's a lot of things like specific safe jumps and tricks and exactly how long your combos can go on based on how much MP you actually have left at the time, etc. Because it is a relatively high damage game, what we call a 3-touch in some cases, and for some characters, even with the infinite removed, it's still a 2-touch game. It means that if you don't exactly know how to play a specific matchup, you're likely to get very quickly destroyed. But for exactly that reason, feel free to jump into this lounge if you are not familiar with these matchups, as we tend to be familiar with enough of them to at least give you first and second order strategies to go up against, sometimes third. You could say that this is therefore slightly more for beginners. But you're not necessarily going to get as much holding back, so you're still going to have to deal with all the massive damage when you make mistakes sort of situations. It is, however, a good metric for what will happen to you if you make mistakes trying to fight at much higher levels, so jump in on that if you want to, just to get matchup information. And we do tend to rotate around after winning 3 times. Similarly, if you are quite a bit stronger and just want matchup practice, same thing. You will probably be able to win consistently by damage, while still actually getting to play a full matchup most of the time. I mean, the time when you're not winning by full damage. clearly.
要用恐惧统治邪恶。你惩罚你，进化，一击，审判，气感，气感，审判，赎罪吧，一身之
One of the main things you'll end up facing as a player of Inquisitor is the fact this character is strong in a very specific way that isn't really all that obvious to most players. And if you're just picking her up because she feels right and looks cool, unlocking her full potential involves a lot of tactical thinking that specifically doesn't make sense if you're coming from other games as much. Because in other games you are not usually thinking of your white health damage as a way to do damage. But this character, especially against characters like Hitman who keep their strings going longer, have more situations in which you have the option for using conversion, and without taking too much damage to do it. You only want the cancel to make more moves to save. Because she has so much control of space and a lot of ability in neutral to make the opponent rethink and overthink situations, taking a hit like that you just saw, that tiny swipe that the opponent is using mostly to keep her away, you can then use as a way of keeping your own pressure going. As soon as you've taken a hit like that, you may now somewhat attack for free, as one of her charging forward style moves, as well as a lot of other good things in neutral, put her in an unsafe position, but with literally a sliver of white health left with which to make a changeover. Without actually using this, you often tend to take damage and be forced onto defense when you otherwise might not actually need to defend. The other discussion among the team right now mostly has to do with things like safe jumps and throw protection, which are other things that if you're coming from other fighting games you might not be as comfortable / familiar with and might have some trouble adapting to. I'd say it's about 50-50 whether or not a game has throw protection on Wake Up, basically that you cannot throw a player on the first frame of their Wake Up or for some number of frames after that. So even if you feel like you're being thrown as soon as you get up and can't do anything, chances are that's just not true at all, and your opponent had some tiny amount of time where they could in fact have been hit. Specifically because your moves tend to take so long to start up, you actually will usually need to use your invincible move for this, but so it goes. You can also use this quite a lot because any opponent who is thinking to throw you late is also often more throwable themselves. That is another situation where Inquisitor in particular, along with Kunoichi in specific ways, get a lot of benefit out of their pressure style. The more you pressure someone, the more likely it is that they must use the guard cancel to push you off them. But the guard cancel does just enough white health damage and nothing else that you'll generally be able to do a conversion style attack. Similar things happen when you've been thrown. Depending on your specific perspective on what to do about it, you can get away with lots more stuff. And therefore, in those situations when you have just been pushed off after burning all of your energy on a long pressure string that failed or got guard cancelled, you should consider that having no MP at that point doesn't mean it's time to stop. If you still have an option for offense based on how you've been thrown off or otherwise bothered by your opponent's defenses, you have conversion, and you normally have conversion without taking much damage in the process. Like that. So that moment there is similar. If I knew a way to get in from that position, it would have been easy enough to keep going. This is of course an option available to all characters, but some are better at setting up the situation and getting it the way they want than others because of their nature. This also is matchup dependent, as some characters tend to deal combo damage that ends in normals and therefore leaves you with some white health damage, and others end their combo consistently on things that don't do this. Conversion is a tactic that we expected to see used a lot more in this game than it tends to be because it has been designed that way. It's a way to get yourself out of situations that might otherwise have been confusing. But for here's an example, Vanguard generally doesn't do damage in that way. I keep forgetting she has some kind of super jump that I don't remember how to do. Even now you can notice the very tiniest sliver of white health on my character. You couldn't see it for very long or very well, but it's there, and having it there from, say, blocking or other situations of that type can be really meaningful for your plans. It often forces your opponent to be even more offensive just to deal with the fact that you could get in on them and begin this sort of thing. A character's effectiveness at using their conversion mechanic in this way can actually be understood based on certain aspects of the character in general. How easy is it to convert from stray hits into combos that end in MP skill damage is among the first things you need to figure out, because there's not much point using conversion to get a small hit on your opponent that then allows them to use conversion too. Hitman is therefore a little bit less effective at this, but it does help Hitman's movement, and you can get a lot more things out of it from the perspective of going in and then converting into dodges or similar things, rather than I'm going to hit you more now. Because this character tends to be safe at most situations, you generally don't need to do it at all. If anything, it's easier to use this to convert when you're doing uppercuts or in the middle of an actual long combo string that you just need to finish when you had a lot of white health built up because of his ability to block for long periods. So it isn't really much of a deviation from Hitman's game plan, nor is it specifically an addition to that game plan to use it in this way. Depending on the matchup, you may also not get much of a reward for doing it, as he already has such long reach on most moves, and relatively safer data, frame-wise, that he doesn't really need to do this that often. You can see there's a lot more work involved in convert land full combo for this character than there is for, say, Inquisitor or Fnoichi, who have, okay, I'm just going to hit this button now, and no matter where you are, I'm basically fine. It's going to land MP damage, or if it doesn't, I usually have a different skill that will somehow still land MP damage. OTG Frog is best frog. But it is still important to think about it purely from the perspective of, do I have enough to do this as a whole? If I've already got my offense going, how long does this combo go? And what would be the best spot in this combo to hit conversion, get more MP, either to make it longer or just to be able to keep pressure up afterward? Fortunately, this isn't necessarily a terribly difficult thing to think about or work into your style over time, especially if you start from the basic perspective of, if I was playing neutral and I ended up blocking, there's a good chance I have enough white health to be fine. Here's a good example of where it often would get used from Hitman's side, though. Hitman will manage to get a knockdown on most things, but then has to go into various forms of pressure. The pressure itself is often the easier use case for the conversion, because he's already strong enough, just strong enough in pressure that the opponent has to care, but then you'll get to a position like this where that moment you're basically putting yourself in a guessing game situation right at that point. But because he tends to block for so long in neutral, you get a lot more situations where he's able to start a combo, let most of his white health recover, and just be at the point in the combo where he can quickly use the conversion. He has such long range that there's not as much dancing around in neutral before he can do something again. He can usually try something, and if that something succeeds, just keep on hitting the opponent while the white health comes back. This plays even more into the specific way Hitman tends to defend. But you'll notice that because of the way his combos work, he's almost always leaving the opponent with more white health at the end of the combo simply because of the OTG attack. And this is one of the few, let's call them balancers, to being hit like that. Because the OTG attack in the game is very seldom an MP skill, with only basically one, Entrenchers might have it too, with basically two characters having that as a main option, you don't really get as much out of it. You're always setting up a scenario where your own defense is going to be at least somewhat compromised by the fact that you did it. This situation, however, exactly there, just about, the conversion would have helped, because if the hit had not been actually working, Hitman would have had a good reason to try to keep the opponent in the corner, keep further stuff going, and because he doesn't tend to use as many skills that have these issues, you can get away with more. So it's definitely easier to think of it as not, I'm converting in neutral. He has normal conversions in neutral off of just relatively normal hits. The best thing to spend your time learning is, how long can my combo go before all my white health is back? And sometimes not combo, but simply, how long does my pressure string go before either converting will give me a mix-up, or converting will give me an ability to do something better overall. Get out of the situation because it might be becoming unsafe. Get my opponent to whiff a guard cancel because it was time for them to guard cancel. Simply not end up back at a spacing that isn't as advantage to me that I didn't like. So here, for example, not going for that might have been better, simply to wake up, block, and then get an option to do more conversion stuff. Vanguard is good at taking away damage from people, but it's explicitly a thing that will get people through. And if you have a long-ranged attack that you can just randomly use basically raw, you can gain a lot out of that. He's a hard character to whiff punish under normal circumstances, unless you are playing someone like Hitman who has like half screen to 3/4 screen normals. But understanding that you can just do that because you feel like it, for more or less, can open up more options for you. A player that feels as though they must stop you from rushing in at them, because if they don't stop you, you will do some conversion craziness, is in a very different mental state than someone who is basically thinking, okay, I have control of neutral now, and even if you force me to block, I'm fine. Different people will react to this in different ways, of course. Some will explicitly hit more buttons, and some will explicitly defend harder and get ready for any conversion mix-up. And you will probably not have a lot of time to figure out which of the two any given player is, if you're just meeting them in ranked or whatever. But it's still helpful to know your own style, because you're not really guessing if you don't know which options you are guessing between. You'll just do whatever seems right, and your opponent might pick up on your habits, since offensive habits of that type are a little bit easier for people to think about and handle. That is approximately the strongest place that Kunoichi can use that, because you can't really do anything about it if she does. Because she can also do it in the air and do moves you might not even think are possible for her to do then. Air conversion is not something that comes up a lot for most other characters because they don't have enough air options, especially not with quick startup, to make air conversion a good plan. But if you do have a character like that, consider it, because especially the ability to get around your opponent's actions and weirdness is a big help. That is avoidable by jumping backward, but it does not work if you jump straight up, so you might as well commit if you're going to do it. I think I'm going to work on whether that's actually true, what I've just said, fully. Whether or not I absolutely can't do it in that situation, but you can't be sure. See, in this case, I know that my opponent is the type to explicitly try to get out of those situations by defending harder and defending better. It worked, but not well enough. I've been working on making him drop the half-screen awakening kill, because otherwise you get locked down too hard in neutral. She dies from the point you are at half health. So you have to probably learn how to actually fake out the opposing hitman so that they must recognize, wait, this range is wrong, and change the combo midway. This doesn't necessarily help you because he remains in awakening, he still has just as much MP, but at least you're not dead. And the entire point of this situation is that you just need to make that happen so you have one more chance to actually to kill off the remaining health. Similarly here, leaving the opponent at just enough health that they have no awakening option is the better option for me. But just adding more layers to your offense isn't in itself enough to actually become effective. Finally, you need to add more layers to your defense using the conversion, and that's a much harder thing to understand. Understanding what exactly is defense, though, when you're playing an aggressive character or trying to use conversion for defense is a little bit harder to understand because it's easy to think of conversion as something to use because you explicitly want to use an unsafe move. But the goal isn't really to use an unsafe move when you're thinking of using conversion for defense. Your opponent is already not thinking of countering a safe move. If you have used a safe move option, your opponent isn't there thinking to themselves, well, I need to counter this. They're thinking, I need to keep defending. Your goal would therefore be to make them think about how to defend incorrectly. This doesn't work as well for characters who don't have, let's call them, crazy mix-ups. But Ghostblade is particularly good at it despite the long startup on many animations. And interestingly, Crusader seems to be able to do this with some instant jump stuff that I don't always understand. But he is also another character who can often pull off error conversion things. If you generally want to focus and practice this skill, you can basically cut it down to just that sort of situation. You were playing neutral, you took one hit, or got thrown maybe, and you're able to look and go, this is not where I want to be, but I can't get closer. Your opponent is making a decision to check your attack, your offense. Just use whatever move will get you to the position you want and convert on that. This option is best mainly because you get to decide whether or not to do anything at all. If you move to the correct position, convert, and block, you're still in the correct position. You don't actually care that you didn't open your opponent up or do damage. You are wherever you wanted to be, wherever your character is most effective. Your opponent must now respond in some way. Some people will try to hit a button, and some won't. But it's better than just not getting to do anything. There are other positions where you could realize that it's going to go that way and change your flows. But as you get lower on health, it's less and less likely that you'll need to do any conversions for the sake of MP regeneration. You would have that only come up when you're on offense and therefore not matter as much. This is a matchup where air conversion is strong for both characters. Because you can just use it to hang in the air if you want. But it's much easier for Kunoichi to make use of this than it is for the Inquisitor to do so, as she has better conversions from the air with quicker animations, and generally does better in that scenario. For example, had I been able to convert there, it could have led to my absolute death, but it also breaks my opponent's perspective in whether or not they should wait for me to fall and then punish. The conversion is, though, quite telegraphed. You can't get to just convert and confuse people unless they're not expecting it at all. So as soon as you start doing that, the situation will shift relatively quickly. This is closer to a gimmick than a full-on strategy. It works better in neutral than for just maneuvering about and hoping for the best. This is particularly helpful with moves like that, where you have basically one combo and you're not absolutely sure if you should even do it. But hit confirming is a bad idea for whatever reason. So you just don't. think I would have lost even if I had done the, let's call it uppercut there. Well, this has become intense, and therefore we're almost coming to what I believe is the end of stream. Though, maybe not, because I did... No, it's not yet. It's not yet time to end stream. As you get better and better at feeling out / understanding your conversion position, health-wise, it'll be easier to get more out of it. But it's a good building block to start from, to just consider the, oh, I took damage in neutral, but I think I can get some offense here. Or I think I can use my defense to get into a better position here. This makes it easier to deal with when the main problem you're having is being irritated by something that's happening in the matchup. I was supposed to hit B first. Characters whose moves take them into the air are relatively rarer in this game, actually. While we may be used to, from other games, the quote-unquote uppercut, the invincible wake-up system, normally involving having some actual rising attack that your opponent then counters, this is not that style of game. You spend a lot more time doing your invincible wake-up without actually going airborne. So if you're the sort of person who have already worked out all of your optimal paths, your max damage combos, see if you can work this into your offense, particularly for characters who need a lot of that. And I think that was my third win, so around we go. This is also a good thing to work on when you feel as if this game is starting to become a little either stale or formulaic to you, as it is just a whole other layer to think about it on. If you're not at that point yet, and you're still working on combos, working on ways to get through systems, you won't necessarily be pushing to think about how can I convert optimally off of everything. But every point of conversion effect benefit that you add to yourself is another that you can throw on the pile for how to kill your opponent slower. And yes, I specifically said slower. It is one of those things that's really hard to practice outside of matches though, because it is one of those things that is core tactical. You can't explicitly go, well, let me grind out my conversion combos, because even if you did grind conversion combos, one, the training mode isn't super helpful for it. You can use reversal systems to give yourself a given amount of white health. For this, we suggest setting it to do reversal actions off knockdown, and just knock down the opponent, take the wake up hit, do your combo, and see where the conversion can work. If you want to do just the combos, this will usually be the best option. But for breaking through opponent things and pressure strings and offense, you may need to do more work. Being guard cancelled is equally helpful. I don't actually remember whether or not it cancels the exhaustion state, but if it does, obviously you can add that to your repertoire of things that make it really helpful as well. And similarly, paying attention to which characters actually leave you with white health at the end of a combo can help you build entire new strategies as to how to fight those characters. It is not, in fact, super common for you to be left with the white health at the end of the combo. I think mostly only the defensive characters tend to leave you with this white health because, you know, it's better to have an option for just fighting people. Similarly, if you find yourself thinking, this game doesn't seem balanced, this character is super strong, or this character is not very effective, that might be the thing you're missing. Some characters are just so difficult to play properly offensively, or even to keep balance on without this as an option, that you really have to work out. Wait, does my character need this? Is this a thing that I must use? Because some don't. Hitman is not a particularly dependent character when it comes to conversion damage, and similarly tends to just take a lot more damage when the time comes. The lounge itself is not necessarily closing up all that quickly. Since these lounges do end when the main player creating it is done, and we don't usually create a new one, it'll basically be whenever Suntier is finished. Or sometime after that, you know, just leave it on so people can get their last matches in. You can of course join us later for our NA version of this stream content at 7:30 Eastern Time. Sadly, we only have small suggestions as to how to handle things for training mode and bots. We don't have an option for bots as the game stands now. Or rather, not the kind that you're used to. We have a thing that could be used if you really needed it, but is still under development and not very easy to input or be used to using at all. So we're still not going to be releasing any of those. Our other bots for other games that have more in-depth training mode options for them can be found at our website 2-mk.org. And information on when we do release such types of content, or whether or not we're streaming on any given day, you can get on our Twitter 2_mk_FGC. Generally, if you haven't seen us tweet by a particular time, there's no stream happening. Today, for example, we did tweet, but it was still a while before stream started, but you still got it. Normally, if we find we can't get to the stream, we'll send out another tweet. I think Vanguard normally survives this. I have not even bothered to check into whether or not characters in this game have different health. Ah, the range. But that does in fact bring us to the end of today's stream. You can join us for more DNF later and for our Mishmashing Battle Lounge in Street Fighter V tomorrow, Monday. The Tuesday Melt, Wednesday Night in Birth, and Feeling Thursday KOF streams will obviously happen on their respective days, and we'll let you know, or technically not let you know, if we're not streaming that day. This has been Rillian for Team 2MK. Good luck with your training. Good night, everyone.